Hello, listeners, and welcome to Privacy Chats with Rachel and John. This is a podcast for privacy professionals and enthusiasts alike. I'm John.
And I'm Rachel, your host, who will be taking a peek at the privacy implications of connected cars. Before we start the episode, I'll share that the information shared throughout this episode is that of our own and not in any way affiliated with our employers or other organizations. These episodes are produced on our own time and are based on our own research and professional opinions. John, you recommended this topic. What resonated with you about this?
So I think a couple of things. One is there's been a lot of advances in car technology, I think, in the last few years. And last year, it's early this year. So last year, at one point, we bought a new car, or my wife bought a new car, we bought a new car.
Congrats.
Thank you. But it's it has a lot of these new features. It's connected. We can, I can go onto my app on my phone and turn it on, stuff like that, which is great because it's supposed to be 9 degrees outside tomorrow. So there's that. I'm recognizing the news technology, and as a privacy professional, I can see the potential implications there. And just last week I was in California. I was there with you, actually. We and California, I think, is the center of where a lot of this technology is happening. You can very often see self-driving cars being tested on the roads out there and stuff like that. So it's just there's a lot going on, and I figured, hey, let's talk about this.
That's interesting because I am an owner of a what do you call it, smart car, connected car, and I have these some of the concerns that we're going to get into floating around in my head. And I didn't buy it because it was the most privacy sensitive car, else I would have bought a 30-year-old beater. But I think it would be great to kind of compare the benefits against the risks in the setting, since it would educate me and our listeners as well.
Yeah.
From what I've at least researched so far, monitoring activities and like the relative awareness that people have about those activities in smart or connected cars compared to phones, it actually seems like cars are worse because of the general lack of awareness. And I'm here as even an example as a privacy professional. I need to do my own research. It's not always immediately apparent what we're subjected to with these tracking and in some ways surveillance technologies that are embedded here. They're totally convenient. I love that I can see in my vehicle any accidents that occur around me or anything happening to my car. And of course, things like Bluetooth connection and tracking help me know where my car is when I park and listen to music with apps embedded there. But I'm not, it's not a mystery that there's a lot of work to be done here as far as privacy. I had read a couple of months ago that the Mozilla Foundation study had reviewed 25 different car brands. So not just the Tesla of the world, but car manufacturers that are migrating over to EVs, and then in the same wave, more internet connected capabilities. None of those car brands that were reviewed had satisfied the foundation's standards on privacy protections. Once I read that headline, it was quite concerning. So I'm curious to hear what your research found as far as the new features that would pose a risk to privacy for our viewers.
So I think let's go back to like the main issue here is that cars are connected. I think I was looking in my own research, I was looking for articles also. I found an article on fortune.com. And I think it certainly referenced that Mozilla Foundation article that you referenced. And the I guess alarming quote that I have from that article that I read on Fortune was that cars are getting an F rating in data privacy. It said that most major manufacturers admit they may be selling your personal information, with half also saying they would share it with the government or law enforcement without a court order, which is different from, I know Apple's been in the news a lot for refusing to share data without court orders. So I thought that was kind of alarming. And
it seems to be a space where I would personally think, just as a consumer, that I have a reasonable expectation of privacy in my car. But aside from that, all the way back from when I was in school, hearing about the advent of internet connected anything devices, IoT, cars, refrigerators from our last episode, you name it. There seemed to be this push or concept in the industry toward software defined vehicles. And that terminology is essentially pointing to this idea that we can make cars like we make phones with all of the same capabilities, to where they're basically ubiquitous to one another. And both of those, even today, are essentially tracking devices.
Yeah.
You have modern cars with Bluetooth transmitters and receivers, Wi-Fi receivers, hotspots. They're sending information to hundreds of entities at any given point. And just like phones, they're leveraging the infrastructure that we built to triangulate location using embedded SIM cards. So
Yeah.
when I want to know where my car is, if say my spouse is driving it, or like I said, mentioned earlier, I've parked it and I don't remember where I parked it. Some of those capabilities are enabled by that triangulation. Do you have any insight, though, on the specific data points that are being collected? They're including those or aside from those?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start off by thinking like, what is it I think that they could be doing? And if you look at the sensors and devices that are in your car, there's microphones that allow us to talk, like, so we can do hands-free talking on our phone. So there's microphones in the car. Obviously, we have speakers. They always have had speakers. A lot of new cars have cameras in them, and I know that I think Tesla's, maybe some other manufacturer, use a camera that's looking at the face of the driver to make sure that they're actually watching the road when they're using the driver assist features. So if you combine all of those together, it can listen to what you're saying, it can watch you. Obviously it's got GPS navigation capability, so it knows exactly where you are, where you're going, how long you stay there. So all of that is kind of a concern to me just that's a treasure trove of data. But looking at research, I found an article. So Matt Burgess was the author. It was published in Wired.com last June, so it's not that old, and said that they ran 10 of the most popular cars through a privacy tool and found that cars can produce 25 gigabits per hour, or gigabytes per
Gigabytes.
hour. Um, and this data includes, in their article, where you're traveling to and from, every press on the accelerator, and your seatbelt settings. So that's a pretty broad range of different types of data. And it also reported they can gather biometric information about you, which I was a little bit surprised by because I can't, I didn't dive deeper into that, but that's a little bit concerning to me.
I will say I did find in my research that that this could be alluding to that, which is there are sensors on some cars on the steering wheel that can sense the pressure and force they're
Sure.
applying to it. And
Yeah.
one article suggested that it can even track weight gain by the amount of weight that's being pushed on the car steering wheel.
Wow.
I don't know if I
Okay.
can verify that personally, but maybe that's part
Yeah.
of the biometrics. I mean, it is data about your body in that sense. I don't know if it's exactly fingerprints, but I don't doubt
Yeah.
that we could move in that direction eventually of starting your car with your thumb, right?
Sure. I mean, yeah, and it's definitely an inference. And actually, the car that Colleen bought is one that it doesn't have a camera looking at your face to make sure that you're paying attention when you're driving, but it uses the steering wheel. So when I get that notice that says, "Hey, make sure put your hands on the wheel," I'm already looking at the road, but all I have to do is kind of just put a tiny bit of pressure on the steering wheel, and it knows that I'm holding the steering wheel. So sometimes, that often happens. So it's different types of sensors in different cars.
There sure are a lot
So
of them, though, no doubt.
there are, and it's creepy, right?
Very
When you
creepy.
think about it.
Not just, I mean, creepy, invasive. And I think it can really put someone in harm's way. And I'm thinking of the more tracking technology side of it. Just as
Yeah.
phones can be, either the traffic can be intercepted or the access to the account that shares that very precise location-based information. I
Yeah.
can imagine that, and I'm mentioning my comment earlier about, when I want to know where my spouse is, just to know when he comes home. We have an app for our cars that allow each other and give us permissions to view that information. But I
Sure.
imagine for abusive relationships, that type of access,
Yeah.
even that ability, can be very harmful. It can prevent someone from having their own autonomy of where they want to go and when, or even,
Mhm.
as far as seeking help when they need to. Another
Yeah.
concern I have on the creepy topic is the fact that I've read that a lot of these transmissions are not end-to-end encrypted. So all of the scenarios that we had mentioned above, all the metadata and the formal data about cars, driving habits, who's in the car, what I'm saying, what I'm doing, that theoretically can be accessed by anyone with access to the server, whether that's the company that should be, protecting our information, or any third party or hacker that gets access to that server. So that's
Yeah.
it's a little beyond the creepy and more on the risk end of things. But what are your thoughts in the risks that could be proposed by this technology that we might not have mentioned so far?
Yeah, well, I think it depends. You kind of have to look at who are the actors involved. I almost said threat actors, but it's kind of beyond that because they're not all actually threat
Yeah, a
actors.
lot of this
And
isn't
the,
for malicious use cases, right?
it's not, and I guess it depends on whose opinion you're talking to, if it's malicious or not. So I, the main player is the company itself, the car company. You buy a car from Ford or Chevy or whoever you're buying the car from. Obviously, they have access to the data. And it's very clear that they're selling that data mostly to advertisers. And I don't know the extent to which they're doing that, but if they know exactly where you are, when you're going there, how long you spend, they can infer a lot from that. Like if your car parks outside of the gym every morning at 5 o'clock, they can infer that you go to the gym and you're a healthy person. And they could take that information and sell it to companies that sell healthy products, for example, right?
Mhm.
So they're selling your data, and some people feel differently about that, but it is your data, and they're monetizing it. So you are becoming the customer here, or you're not the
The
customer, you're the
product.
product. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, Insurance companies could, and one of the pieces of research that I found suggested that insurance companies or that car companies are divulging some of this information to insurance companies. And I don't want my car company and my insurance company to be in cahoots with each other because,
Mhm.
frankly, I don't want my insurance company to know some of my driving habits. I hope they're
Mhm.
not listening to this. Um, Law enforcement, we mentioned earlier that that one article that I talked about, they mentioned that in some cases they'll turn over information to law enforcement or the government without warrants. And I don't know how I feel about that, but that's an actor who's gaining access to these data. The obvious one is cyber criminals, and you kind of alluded to that. If people can gain access to this data, they're not going to use it to sell it to advertisers, but they might try if they can use it against you in some way.
Or build a
They
database
will.
about a lot of people in order to, achieve some strategic advantage in a situation that it was never meant for.
Yeah,
Totally.
or even using like those remote control features that you have,
To mess with us,
um, to either
flip
to
in my
mess with
car
you or
and
to victimize you in some way, or if they can, somehow hold your car ransom,
Mhm.
that you can't use it until you pay us a certain amount of money, or if they, hear something that you say in your car that might be sensitive or embarrassing or something like that, or even if you're doing something wrong, like, I don't know, you're supposed to be at work and you're at a baseball game
Mhm.
and that information is available and they try and ransom you that. I'm going to tell your boss unless that might be a far-fetched idea, but and apart from that, it's just going back to the creepy factor. Like
The principle stands. Yeah.
the principle stands. I don't have an exciting or interesting life. And I could say, like, why do I care if somebody knows I went to Lowe's and Starbucks and bought a pair of Birkenstocks or something? I don't care, but I do. Like mind your business. Leave me alone.
Mind your
So
business. Yes.
mind your business.
Yeah, and I reflect as a consumer and a US citizen that a lot of these technologies are baked in some cases to subsidize the cost of something. I mean, we've seen that in more purely software and technology devices, but I wonder
Yeah,
how that'll translate into cars where, I mean, they're remarkably expensive right now, just relative in the past to inflation. But I do
right.
wonder if this is an angle or a play by car manufacturers to, lower the price during a certain period of time where they know they can get the income from the data they're selling from what's collected in our cars. And
Yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, hate to cut you out there, but I would actually love to see that happening. Like, if I am the product, I actually want to get paid for it.
Yeah,
But the
more
reality is,
directly.
well, yeah, I mean, at least lower the price on the car. So I haven't seen that happening because I'm actually in the market for a car. The prices are not coming down as far as I can tell. But yeah, they're still taking all of this data from us. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it will be complex to see how, if and when that scenario occurs, how that's balanced against users or consumers, I should say, exercising their rights for perhaps not
yeah,
wanting to be surveilled. Like, is that okay to spend more money and probably the magnitude of thousands to not have these features, but to fundamentally have the same car for a marked up price? I
sure.
mean, that's something that's contested in software today, but I can see the same thing happening just for vehicles in the future. And
Yeah.
the myriad of risks we've covered so far, and I know at the surface level there's a ton of research that goes into each of these ones in depth, but I'm wondering, how can the average consumer you know monitor and mitigate these risks and make truly informed decisions?
Yeah, so I did some research specifically about that, and I found a couple of things. There was a Wired article that mentioned a vehicle privacy report, powered by Privacy for Cars. So it's pretty easy to find if you're looking for it, and it offers this report that you can run. So I ran the report. So I put it. You have to put the VIN number of your car into it, which, pointing out, that's actually giving up some personal
Identifiable
identifiable
information.
information
Yep.
into a website that I just randomly found on Google. Anyway, so you're welcome. I've done the research for our audience. So I ran it in for a 2014 car, which is why I'm on the market for a new car, because that's what I'm driving. And it gave me some interesting information. It kind of put together some information about what types of data that my particular car collects. Although I wasn't sure if it was about my specific make or model of car or just the manufacturer. So it kind of told me that, and it broke it down by specific categories, like if it's giving it to other resellers or service providers or the government, different agencies like that, um, and who they're selling it to. And it also said it looked like it could have some information about a loan or a lease, but that car's paid off, so there's no information in there about that. It did say I have insurance on the car, but it listed the wrong insurance company, so I'm not so sure that that information was correct. And then it had a section about telematics, and said that this was turned on the car, meaning it has a SIM card that's able to connect, which I simply don't think is true for that car, 2014 car. I don't think that was true. I ran a VIN for the car that we bought last year and have slightly different information, which is more relevant to the newer features in the car. So, that's one thing you can do is do some research. I came across a Federal Trade Commission recommendation. It's a little bit dated. It was from 2018, but it was talking about clearing your personal data from your car before you sell it or transfer it, and things like deleting your phone contacts and your mobile apps that you might have, and even said digital content like music may be stored on a built-in hard drive. But I'm not sure why I would care too much about somebody having music.
Hmm.
And then location data, stuff like that. And then pointed out your garage door codes if you have garage door opener built into your car. And then the last one was a different article by Josh Max that was in Forbes.com. And his advice, so his article was specifically titled "How to Reduce the Amount of Personal Information Your New Car Collects." So totally aligned with our episode. We should have asked him to join us. Anyway, he said to check the owner's manual, don't install the car's app on your smartphone, don't activate Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, buy an old car, which is what you suggested earlier,
Reader. Yep.
and read your terms of service. So that was his advice. I'm not so sure. A little bit skeptical.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, those recommendations really seem to vary in practicality, right? It's going to be harder and harder to find as time goes on cars that are not embedded with these telematics and, app embedded technologies. And I would even, you said that you'd be surprised if there were really telematics embedded into your 2014 vehicle, but
Yeah.
a lot of my research showed that these capabilities have been around for longer than we would have suspected. I mean, that's a lot of the sharing through telecommunication providers. And I think a lot of the instances of law enforcement access and requests for that sort of information has had those telematics in scope as far back as 10, 15 years ago. So I guess my own personal recommendation is, even if you don't think that your car is new enough to be embedded with this, it's always worth it to check and do some research from your manufacturer themselves. And they should be giving information on the year, make, and model and everything specific. Although your tool is a quicker way to get there if you aren't worried about that VIN information.
Yeah, that's actually very enlightening. So thanks for sharing that, Rachel. And it troubles me even more because the reality is, if I do have telematics, I don't know, built into that car, I'm getting zero benefit from it. So in the newer car, I understand it's there because I'm using
It's
some of the
advertised.
features that use it,
Yeah.
right? And it's advertised, so I'm told about it. So if it's in the 2014 car, there's zero benefit for me. So maybe the car manufacturer is getting something out of it. So I'm troubled by that.
Yeah.
I'm going to dig deeper on that one.
Do it. And another thing I want to comment on before we wrap it up here is that garage door opener access. I remember, I don't think it was on this podcast, but we were talking about a friend, I'll say, shorten this up. A friend of a friend actually had their house robbed because when
Mhm.
they parked their car at a parking terminal for the airport on the way to a work
Yeah.
trip, they had their car opener in their car and their address actually in the glove box of that car. And someone
Yeah.
came in, broke into their car, and because they had not locked the inside of their garage, simply taking that car to their house that they had access to with that
They were able to
information in
get
the
in the
glove
house.
box, they were able to get
Yeah.
in the house. They robbed a whole bunch of stuff and they left. And I'm sure, I mean, there were cameras everywhere. They were likely identified, but
Yeah.
that's a lot of messy, cleanup to do and file those insurance claims and all that. And you could take your valuables that you really care about, and it's a scary thing to be broken into. So
It's intrusive. Yeah. Even if
yeah,
they took nothing, just knowing that some stranger was walking
it's
around in your
possible
house.
simply by getting into your car. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's scary. So I don't know where to go with all of that because the reality is I want the new features in my car. I like to be able to turn it on using an app on my phone and I know that like the remote key fobs do it also. But if you're farther away, if you're still sitting in the middle of a restaurant, you want your car warmed up and you get out there. Um, so I want the new features, but I don't want them to use the features against me. So somehow we need to find that happy middle ground in there. Um, and it's doable. I think that there's a lot of oversight over the technology industry. We talked in the past about oversight that the FTC has over technology and social media companies, and we've talked a lot about GDPR and the influence that has on technology companies and social media companies. And because of that oversight, I think there's less of an invasion of privacy in our overall use of technology. But so far, cars and Internet of Things devices and our refrigerators that we talked about before seem to be falling under the radar and nobody's paying attention to it. And I think that there's a good opportunity right now for car manufacturers and device manufacturers to, just start to self-regulate and apply good privacy practices that are looking out for our best interests. So I'd say that would be the best outcome because I don't like there to be a government oversight when it's not necessary. Sadly, I don't think that they're going to do that because they can make a lot of money from selling us to
Mhm.
advertisers. And short of that, the regulation. So
Yeah, they're essentially waiting to be told what's right and what's wrong. That's scary.
yeah,
And I mean, personally, I think you're talking about expanding beyond just the immediate software space for people, organizations like the FTC. I think this is a good example of where they might be biting off more than they can chew from themselves
yeah,
alone. So I'm certainly not against a more comprehensive privacy regulation. I know we're seeing a lot more states and even the protection agency in California taking more of an interest specifically in cars this year. I'd like to
yeah,
see more, states designate a specific organization to help them out in that regard before we can see a federal privacy regulation that might cover things like IoT devices in cars. Maybe that'll help
yeah.
incentivize better practices and, maybe less in an elective way, but more of a, positive incentive to show compliance and gain trust for, all consumers. Well,
Yeah, it's true. And I think that California is the place that's most likely to do it sooner.
set
So
a good example.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Privacy Chats with Rachel and John. You can find the links to the articles that we mentioned in the episode description. And don't forget to check out our LinkedIn page where you can keep up to date with our latest episode releases. We previously mentioned a chat regarding AI in privacy with a well-seasoned subject matter expert in the data protection field. We are still looking forward to recording that chat in the coming weeks. Stay tuned, and thank you, John.
Thanks, Rachel. See you next time.
See you next time.